Hi, friends. It's Heidi M, and I'm virtually joined by Matthew MacKenzie and Mariya Khomutova. Nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you.
So I'm excited to speak to you about your play, First Métis Man of Odesa, that is going to return to Toronto in I think it's next week. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting close. But before we dive into this production, I kind of wanted to sort of take a step back and then let you introduce yourselves a little bit about your work in theater, and then we can take it from there.
Sounds good.
All right, who wants to start?
Go ahead.
Maybe you.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So my name is Mariya Khomutova. I am from Ukraine. I'm Ukrainian actor. I was born in Odesa, Ukraine, and I graduated Theater University in Kyiv in
Mhm.
2012 and stayed to work in Kyiv in theaters, in two theaters. I used to work in repertoire theaters and independent theater projects there. Also had an experience in film and TV in Ukraine, co-productions and national productions. So, and also I was an acting coach for adults and kids. I had a pretty intense and busy life. That's where we also met with Matt in Ukraine, in Kiev. I worked with a independent theater, and they told me that they're going to have a reading of a play that Canadians write. Canadians are coming to Kyiv. Do you want to participate in this workshop? And I said, yes, yes.
Yes, and my background is as a playwright, and I went to the National Theatre School, the playwriting program. I graduated, maybe 15 years ago now, and then after graduating, I got into producing my own plays because I like to do the artistic director side of things. So I also run my own little company called Punctuate Theater, which is the producing theater of First Métis Man of Odessa.
Excellent. So I think we're going to get more into your experience of meeting and coming together because it is sort of the basis of the play. But I'm curious about that negotiation between the two of you to decide this is a story that we want to tell, so let's start writing and sort of that first iteration of, okay, let's do this.
Well, I think we first little kind of iteration was a radio play
Mhm.
version of the story for Factory Theater in Toronto, and it was pre-Russian invasion, so it was just covering our story of our romance and our welcoming our son and getting married, of course, all during the pandemic. So it was sort of a I guess a romantic comedy with the backdrop of the pandemic, and we knew we wanted to continue to develop it for the stage. We didn't quite know how, and then of course Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and after a few months of just trying to make sense of what on earth was going on in the world and hearing the terrible stories out of Ukraine, we decided to start to write down our story from that point also. So then the other part of our story was our experiences with the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, Matthew proposed me just to write out some impressions and thoughts that I have inside of myself in a very informal way, like a diary or just writing all out on the blank sheet. And I share it with Matthew, and I did. And that's how it just started as a collaboration of sort of exchanging what we are going through. And we met together on the territory of writing and exchanging. And then Matthew more seriously, like maybe in the end of 2022,
Mhm.
structured it as a play.
Yes, we'd already
Mhm.
booked several theaters to do the
Yeah.
show, so that was
The
that's
motivation.
pretty important to thank goodness it did turn into a play. Because yeah, I think it was an interesting experience as a couple because I had one playwright friend said, "Oh, if you try to do this show together, it's going to ruin your marriage." And then we did it, and it actually allowed us to communicate and
Mhm.
understand what the other had been thinking. during periods where we were very much in our own heads, in our own worlds. So it proved to be helpful in that regard. But you know that process is ongoing.
Yeah, no, and I can see why people might assume that it's not necessarily always good to work with one's partner, but
Yeah,
or family in general, right?
yeah,
I
totally.
think I think what I've read also about now that it's a full-fledged play is that it also allows you to discuss themes of war and how those who may not necessarily be in the country anymore because you've had to fled, how that impacts your life. And I kind of wanted to maybe, I don't know if Mariya, you want to start, but what that process was like in deciding it's going to become a bigger story now and how we want to negotiate those themes with other personal themes like being a couple and being parents.
Well, the state where I occurred to be after the war happened was a very sort of gray zone, and I didn't know what to do with it, like whether I should write about it or not, whether I should be a creator, an actor at all, because it's a very devastating feelings, also with a huge feeling of guilt, the guilt of a person who is not going through this, but also has friends and families in Ukraine. So I was torn apart whether I should go to Ukraine and volunteer and help, or I should stay here in Canada because there is my son, my husband, and we took my mom from Odessa. So it was like a
Right.
huge torn apart inside of myself. And actually, I just recall this right now, and I have conversations with some friends, Ukrainian friends who also fled, and they share the same experience. So I thought, okay, maybe if I can honestly, just very honestly write it all out, maybe it can help someone else to
Mm-hmm.
to reflect and navigate through what they're going through, because the amount of refugees now is amazing. It's huge. Ukrainians are everywhere. Um, so maybe this show and the experience that I shared with the audience helps someone to also go through their own. I'm talking about Ukrainians right now because I was very on the Ukrainian part and still remain as a Ukrainian voice in this play. Matthew is more responsible for Canadian part of the audience. Um,
Sure.
yeah, so now I feel that I have a purpose sort of this play. I found it, but it was not easy for me in the beginning of writing it to find the play. What for whom? Why should I do it at all? There were many, many questions. How am I going to write about the war if I don't have this experience of the war? Do I have this right to write about it? And et cetera, et cetera. But now
Mhm.
I think I answered those questions sort of for
Yeah.
myself. In a year after performing it, I answer those questions.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a minute too. And Matt, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything here about that process of also adding other layers into the story so that it balances out um, what you want audiences to experience.
Yeah, I think that we realized that, well, we were very conscious that we did not want to appropriate the experiences of our friends and family
Mhm.
who are in Ukraine under threat every day. You know, my father-in-law is in Odessa, and Odessa is getting bombed every day. We in Toronto here have never woken up to air raid sirens or explosions. And so, but we wanted to tell the story of people who you know, we might be walking and pushing our son on in the stroller through our neighborhood here in Toronto, but we're our minds on that all the time, and I think that's something that a lot of people in Toronto and Canada can relate to. Is this that we a lot of people are not from Canada or weren't born here,
Mhm.
um, and are, have another life or another world that they are thinking a lot about elsewhere, and it seems to have really resonated with them, that you don't really know what people are carrying day to day.
Mhm. I'm glad you said that because I know in researching over the notes from the last year that you've taken the play on tour, which is really great. I've seen some really great reception for the play, and whether it's from Canadians who are of Ukrainian background or otherwise. And I think that notion that some of us were born somewhere else and that we carry that with us is always present, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if we came as children or if we
Yeah.
forced to leave as adults or older because of other circumstances. So I think that's sort of a thread that I found really interesting in reading
Yeah.
about the show. So congratulations on that. I really appreciate those kinds of stories. So let's talk about this production now that you've toured, and again, great reception, and you have some really interesting sort of people working with you in the production. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the music and the projections and other parts of the production that I think are really important.
Yes, for
They are
sure.
amazing. We have amazing artists working with us, that's for sure. Yeah.
So what was the decision in terms of working with Daraba, your composer, and of course that is, someone from Kiev too. So curious about that.
Yeah, Daraba is a musical band, if I
Mhm.
might say that, with the leadership of Andrei Merhel. Merhel Andrei is a Ukrainian contemporary composer. He writes operas, he writes electronic music. He has a big variety of music, and he has his own team of musicians. That's why it was easy for us to give him sort of directions and moods and intentions that we wanted to see in a play, and he could experiment with that, because although his musicians live in different countries now, the girl I think lives in Germany or Sweden, I don't remember.
They're all over like
They
Croatia. And yeah.
and still they could like compile this music together and send it to us as often as we asked. They were very up to date and very responsive team. And yeah, actually I was surprised. And also Andrei doesn't speak English. So we were actually talking through the translator through, I translated, and then he sent emails through Google Translator. And I thought, oh my God, how it will work, how he will understand. Actually, it's such a like vague moment when you try to express what you need in a stage, in a scene, to English speaking like composer, and he's not. And I don't know, he intuitively somehow understood it and corresponded it to his musicians. So we are very satisfied and glad with this collaboration. I hope we will continue to do that.
Yeah, and our designer Daniela, she is not indigenous, but you can see with almost all the projects that she's worked on, she's worked primarily with indigenous creators, which is very cool. So she's sort of an ally on steroids. And she's got she approaches it in a very non-hierarchical manner and very collaborative manner, and so her generosity of spirit really allowed for us to bring in folks like Marie Marchand, who's an incredible visual artist and working to become a theater designer as well. And she did our scenic painting and also was doing the cultural consulting on the design. And that was such an inspiring experience that now my company has started sort of a indigenous design cohort where we're gonna work with folks who are incredibly, gifted and celebrated in what they do, be it beading or tan work or woodwork, and we're bringing them all under an umbrella to see where their talents might be shared in the theater. And so yeah, it was very special in that regard.
Very cool. And I understand there's also projections that are part of the show. Can you talk a little bit about the projection work by Amelia?
Yeah, I mean, Amelia is, she's super in demand. She's from Montreal and a wonderful person. Again, just incredible generosity of spirit, and she has that ability to take, what is really a low budget indie show and just elevate it with her projections that gives you this immersive feel. And in the show, we're jumping between times and between countries very rapidly, and she really kind of creates that magic carpet that we ride on.
I'm glad you also talked about the switching locations, in our minds, that in the show, and time. And it's also the two of you on stage. I know, Matt, you say you don't really act, but how do all of these, I think is what I'm trying to get, is that audiences get to appreciate all the work that goes into a show like this one, where there are two people on stage, but there's a lot of other work that sort of supports you.
Yeah, a lot.
For sure. So over this past year, what have maybe any lessons or any sort of like great moments that you're kind of adding to the show in this new version or iteration?
Well, I mean, I think our just a familiarity with the content, and especially me not being a trained actor on stage, having now done it over 100 times. I hope that I've gotten better. And so yeah, there's I'm having more fun on stage with Mariya, and less like just super nervous that I'm gonna make a mistake at all times. But like led by our director Leanna McCoof, and then
Mm,
the amazing design team, it really feels like they kind of created that, like that incredible vehicle for us to share this story with people across the country. And so it's awesome to step on stage and just to have total trust in the team, because not being an actor, even though I work in theater, getting up in front of hundreds of people every night is nerve-wracking, and having
mm,
that trust and those people, their incredible talents, supporting our work has made all the difference in the world, that's for sure.
mhm,
Yeah, I can just add that this kind of show where we don't have any fourth wall, where we really speak to the audience, it demands a lot of like vulnerability and honesty, and like we're connecting. And that's maybe the most precious thing that I found about First Meeting Man, is that we're talking to people from stage. I really feel it sometimes that they respond to what we're saying, and we listen how they respond. So it's interaction. And that's very precious that we can do that from different like stages around Canada. I'm so lucky and grateful that I could be in different theaters all around the country, the best theaters, I think, different sizes, like different training again, how to
mm,
volume, send the voice, all this kind of stuff, and like yeah, space interaction. As for actor, for me, it's very cool because, and it's also like in English. I didn't perform in English before. That was a huge training for me as well.
mhm.
So mhm.
Yeah, and now that you're saying that, I'm thinking about how, you've had to adapt. So there's a lot of adaptation, even on a personal level, like your personal life, you had to adapt, you had to move here, and now you're adapting your personal story into this sort of open dialogue with audiences.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
any sort of special reactions or feedback that you've received over the last year that sort of has stayed with you, or I'm always curious about audiences' reactions over time.
Well, amazingly, Ukrainians came almost after every show in every city and like thanked us. And some of them were very emotional and cried, or were happy on the contrary and said, like, you helped me to go through my own experience. And also, I like meeting like Ukrainian indigenous couples. There were a couple of them
Hmm.
Mhm.
who are also married, and they said, oh, we saw ourselves on stage or something like that,
You're right.
because yeah, Ukrainians and indigenous are very connected
Mhm.
here.
That's so interesting and so nice to hear. So, for this production that's going to open here in Toronto next week, you're working with Soul Pepper, and I think you have worked with them in the past. And what's this sort of collaboration like in terms of being on that stage here and
Well, I
working?
think one of my favorite experiences I've ever had at the theater was in the theater we're performing in, and I saw Ravi Jain at Why Not
Mm,
Theater's Brimful of Asha. And that was a show that really showed me that if you have a good enough story, your true story told by the real people can be super compelling. It doesn't always work, but so that gave me a belief that this play could be something that people would respond to. And
mm,
and Soul Pepper, we kind of moved to Toronto a few years ago because I was named Bailey Artistic Artist in Residence, or whatever the title was. And so I got to know the wonderful team at Soul Pepper, Wayne Mangesha. Wayne, when the invasion was launched, Wayne was the first artist to reach out and ask what support Mariya needed, and what community she needed. And so Soul Pepper was wonderful insofar as they give us space to, prepare the show in record time. And so coming back now, it feels like we're coming full circle. And it's funny because I just ran into a fellow who's at George Brown there, and the George Brown train's in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Oh, I see you're here back with a show." And I remember like seeing you like a year and a half ago, and you said you didn't even know if you had a play yet. And I was like, "Oh yes." Yeah, I was very upfront about the fact that we didn't necessarily know what we had. So that was a great reminder.
I like how people remember those tidbits, right?
Yeah, people
To
remember
remind you were.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm thinking of other things that I want to discuss real quickly too. I wanted to maybe ask again, what are you hoping now that, sometimes people were bombarded by so much information lately, and what is it that this story that can still sort of give audiences to reflect upon, and sort of whether or not you've been impacted, whether you're Ukrainian or not, or impacted by war directly, what is it that you're hoping this story will continue to bring audiences and sort of talk about, feel about, and kind of carry with them?
I feel like right now we live in a time where it feels like with various things that are going on in the world right now, it feels kind of hopeless. And that there's no way for us to kind of get out of the cycles that we're in or the suffering that people are experiencing. And I think that our message is one of hope and not looking away from what's happening, but making it human, not these places in the world not being names you can't pronounce or places you've never heard of, but very very human, very relatable.
Mhm.
And that's why we tell our story as people who have experienced that in Canada, and that seems to resonate with people. And the conflict in Ukraine has only gotten worse with the situation there. So it's as urgent as ever to share this story. But we know that there are people who are suffering and under threat in many places in the world. So this is just a way of kind of honoring all those who live in fear.
Yeah, I like what you say about not closing your eyes on the conflict that's ongoing and it continues and becomes worse. But yeah, it's sometimes also a feeling that you can do anything and that you're like useless and hopeless. And but actually, any person can help with like empathy and just real listening to what other person is going through, if he's Ukrainian or not Ukrainian, just asking what does he need or what she need or something. Yeah, it's just a small help of compassion and empathy that everyone can show, and it will be a huge. If someone decides after the show just to talk to someone from Ukraine and ask what he needs, I think it will be for one night, for 2 nights, he will have this feeling that I want to do something good. That's more than I can ask, I think, because that's how the love and hope and basic things that we need now can evolve and not die. It's so easy to bury hope now, really. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I understand that as well. And in thinking about the show being so personal, how do you take care of each other and yourselves individually, because you are putting yourselves and your story on a regular basis? So I'm wondering how I agree that it's important for us to dialogue and talk about the story, but how do you take care of yourselves?
Well, it's certainly a challenge because go out and we tell this story about living with my mother-in-law and the war ongoing in Ukraine, and then we go home and we're living with my mother-in-law and the war is ongoing in Ukraine. So it's not like this is a historical work. So we'd be lying if we said that it was an ongoing challenge. But we're so fortunate as artists to be able to share something and feel like we're actually doing something tangible, sharing the story at this time. Because if we were just sort of sitting here in the
Stuck here.
abyss, that would be much worse. But it's not easy, and I think there's periods in the play which are very vulnerable, like when Masha's feeling sharing stories about family and friends in Ukraine who we know are under threat right this moment. and if someone's phone goes off or someone's chatting in the theater, that's challenging. But by and large, people have been incredibly generous, and they're with us. You know, I've had a few shows produced, and audience actor relations are always very interesting to me. But
Yeah.
in this one, I think especially when they're like, "Oh, this guy really isn't an actor. He's not lying." You know, like when I flub a line, I can feel them lean forward and they sit there with me. They want me,
Right.
they don't want me to make a fool of myself. And so I think people experience the story in a different way. I don't want to say like something we're sharing in a living room because it's very theatrical.
Right.
But the reactions and the conversations we have after the show with dozens and dozens of people across the country have been unlike anything I've ever experienced. So that's been a really unique, special aspect of this project.
Yeah, I think this show is just the smallest thing that we can do for Ukraine. And we found this like sort of railway. We're doing this. That's our like donation line. That's our, I don't know, helpline through
In
the
addition
art.
to making real donations,
In
yeah.
addition to making
No, and I think it also is a testament of how art can be a way to process, right?
Mm,
You're processing through telling us a story, but we as audiences are also processing with you as well. Right? And I think that it's not just a small thing you're doing. I think you're doing a big thing and allowing us to sit through a lot of that stuff as well.
We hope so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm always curious about speaking with artists, because there's sometimes this thought that it's a small thing you're doing, but it's really quite an impactful thing. At least
Thank you
that's
for
what I
saying.
noticed. Yeah, no, of course. And I also noticed that from fellow audience members when we're sitting in a room, and you can tell by people's eyes when they're really excited and invested in the story. And it's always nice to be able to be in community that way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I say that. So thank you so much, both of you, for your time and your art. And I'll be sure to mention on my website so people can go to and get information on the show. But it opens in, I think it's around May 8th or 10th.
Yeah, first preview is the 8th, and we open on the 9th, and we run till the 19th.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So hopefully we'll see you sometime after the show.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you for chatting.
Please come and see the show. We will be
Of
glad
course.
to see you after.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adios.
Bye.